the Millrose Games are over, and like many track and field events, I decided to talk about it on this channel. But this time, when I did, the comment section spoke incredibly loudly back to me. I tell you in these videos that when you comment, I do try to read them all. I may not be able to respond to all of them, but I do try to read them all. But for a situation like this, where people were practically shouting at me through the comments, I decided that I need to do a direct response. So no, this video was not going to have a whole bunch of editing. For that matter, I don't really plan on editing at all. I'm going to try to just talk straight through it. And beyond that, I want to dignify the things that people are actually saying. I can admit when I am wrong, and I am doing that right now. But if people want to have a conversation, we need to have the real conversation. Because this channel, Coach Rob Track and Field, doesn't really belong to me. It belongs to the community. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to explain why. Because just about everything that I give you is a direct reflection of what people are telling me they actually want. So when we bring up the Millrose Games, there are two conversations that actually come up. One conversation was about the Millrose Games itself, and specifically how people felt about the event. The other conversation was actually more about the video that I made as a recap, and specifically how did I market or produce that video through the system. We're talking about the title and the image that you might have seen. For the record, that title and image has now been changed to something else, and I'll get to why in a moment. It's not that I don't stand behind what I did in the beginning. And when I made that change, there's real data to suggest that that change was not what was best. But like I said, we'll talk about it. So let's first talk about the games themselves. In my recap video, I stand behind everything that I said. Millrose, especially on the distance side, it was an amazing event. The athletes showed up and they showed out. We had Olympic caliber athletes who came to the track and did exactly what people wanted them to do and then some. And we got records on top of records as a result of it. World records, American record, I believe it was a high school national record. Like, the distance athletes did their thing. I did a poll after Millrose because I was watching the event. And when I did the poll, I asked, how did people feel? Did it live up to the hype? Or did they feel let down that some of the athletes they wanted to see weren't there? Over 80% of the community said that it lived up to the hype. And I made a video that didn't necessarily sound like that. So it can sound like I'm crazy when 80% of the community says the event lives up to the hype, and my video is anything less than, this is super amazing. It was the greatest meet ever. World record, world record, world record. That's just not how I talk, number one. But beyond that, it wasn't exactly what I was feeling. But that's why I did a second poll. The second poll that I did had very different data come back. And what that poll was, I asked, how many people would pay to watch a track and field event that didn't have any world championship or Olympic finalists in attendance? Remember, I used the word pay, like spend money, because considering Millrose was on Peacock, you actually have to pay for it. Half of the community, for that matter, more than half, like 56% of the people said they either definitely wouldn't watch or certainly wouldn't pay to watch it. This is why I say the story of the Millrose Games is really two separate stories, because the field events, okay, it's fine, it's three separate stories. The field events are so far out of mind that you really don't see anything about it on a television coverage feed. I have Peacock and I watch the feed from start to finish. I don't believe anything field event was really brought up while you were watching it. Certainly not live. But then you get to the track events. You had sprints and hurdle events, and then you had distance events. I've already established, and I even said in my recap, that the distance races, they lived up to the billing and then some. Anytime you're getting records on top of records, and we had athletes that were battling it out to the line on the way to those records. So you really can't complain about that. But I said, let's have the real conversation. The track and field community is not just one community. Unfortunately, it's very divided. You have the distance community on one end, at least when we talk about the track events, then you have the sprints and hurdles community on the other. And you could even argue that they're a little bit fractured. And it is what it is, because people who watch sprinting don't necessarily watch the hurdles. If they did, what you would watch on a platform like this, specifically looking at the view count of what people want to watch, it would be very normalized between the sprints and the hurdles. It's not. It's night and day that people clearly want to watch sprinting events, especially the 100 or the 200, more than anything else. So for the sprinting fields, no, a lot of the top pros did not choose to show up. It just is what it is. They elected not to run. What we were left with is it doesn't matter whether the athletes competed at a high level. It's never against the athletes who showed up. It's the fact that, for the most part, people self-selected out of running indoors. Not just for Millrose, but in general. But some, when it came to Millrose, like they were even on the list, like supposed to run, and then they didn't actually run. So you put that on one end. So if you're somebody who's focused on the sprints or slants towards it, which I admit I slant towards it, but I also understand the distance community because I coached distance. I was a sprinter in college, but I coached distance running, and I coached it at the high school level and at the college level. I'm not saying I was the best distance coach in the world, but my team was actually solid. And I'm talking about an NCAA program. They were actually respectable in distance running with me as the head coach. All that being said, if the distance community is all we're asking, it totally explains why Millrose was an amazing event. But if you care about the sprinting and the hurdling side, it didn't necessarily carry across all of the events when a lot of people self-selected out. The women's hurdles is maybe the only event where we had a decently, I guess, from like at the top, you had several athletes who were Olympic finalist caliber, world record holder in the 60 hurdles. Like you had Olympic champion Messiah Russell, like you had those types of names in the field. So when you're thinking about how do you feel about Millrose, the two polls I did now make sense. Where on one end, if it's the distance community that's responding, they're like, this was amazing. But there's a lot of sprinters who don't really know the first thing about distance. They couldn't tell you what a good time actually was in those events. I'm not one of them because I understood both sides and I had to learn both sides. But when I was in college, I didn't know much of anything about distance while I was on the team. I just knew whether an athlete from my team was winning or losing. That's about it. I didn't know much about their training cycles. I didn't know much about the times they would run, what was good, what was bad. None of that made sense to me. It all made sense the moment I became a coach in that space and started studying and learning how did it actually function. So that's the whole issue with Millrose and the two sides of it. Because on one end, it was amazing. And if you only care about that end, then of course it was a great experience. And I'm even going to respond to this comment as far as the Armory and the environment. The Armory only seats 5,000 fans. So it's not that hard to pack it out if you actually advertise it as a major event. Millrose used to be in Madison Square Garden, and I don't believe it was getting enough fans to fit that venue. And it also didn't have the great infrastructure because they had a makeshift track that they built in order to do it. But when you move over to what it is now, I expect that event to be a live event. And by live, I mean like exciting event. I've competed at the Armory, and I'm actually from the New York City area. So I understand it very well. There was a comment that was like, do you even know anything about, New York City and the Armory? Have you ever even been here? Like, yes, I actually have. Like, I've been there many times. I've even practiced at the Armory, like done training practices in the Armory in the track and field center. So it is what it is. As you move on to the other side of this conversation now, because now I think I've shared my thoughts on the whole, the split between like why some people really loved Millrose. And this channel, like I said, it belongs to you all. Now let's get to the other half. The video I made as a recap, I changed the title and I changed the image. Like the image that you see when you're scrolling through your feed. The reason why I did it is because people felt that it was a little bit too negative in the way it was framed. And I was accused of constantly kind of filling my videos with these, kind of rage baiting or, whatever type of ideas about like, nobody has ever seen this and nobody expected. And I'm glad you asked. Let's have the very real conversation. Please tell me in the comments how you actually feel. Because the thing about this platform is when you produce anything and you send it to the system, there's a lot of data, like analytics, that will determine whether or not that video is going to get shared or whether it's going to get shown to a whole bunch of people. The way that actually works then is you need enough people to click on it, to affirm it, to show that they're interested in it, especially in the first few hours, for it to even get recommended to anybody else to actually watch it. I had to learn while I was on this platform what types of ideas can you lead with, what types of images can you use in order to promote increasing that number. Because otherwise, you could have the exact same content piece, like the recap video, where it was actually doing all right when it had a negative framing in terms of how it was traveling through the machine. It's the video never changed. The only thing that changed was the image attached to the video and some of the words that were reading under it when people might actually go to click on it. The moment that I changed it, the amount of people who started watching it went down. And when I say went down, it went down significantly. So basically I turned off the video by changing the way that it was packaged. It just is what it is. And I was like, fine, people don't want to see it that way. I'll just change how it is and just let nobody watch it. It was the same video. For the people who watched it after, the negative comments went away, meaning whatever I was saying in the video wasn't problematic. It wasn't what I did on camera. It wasn't, how I edited it. It wasn't anything that I said about this athlete or that event. The problem is the way that it's framed is going to govern how people understand it. And the comments that I get on the pieces that I put out there, it's pretty clear that I can almost guess, especially if I'm running a test, to see, what the community wants, because I almost always run a test. So if you watch a video early on, in the first few hours that it was released, there's probably multiple images, and depending on who you are, you're getting a different image, and the system is going to determine which one people, quote unquote, like the most. I'm not saying that I like it, but if I'm going to continue to do this, like I said, this channel belongs to you more than it does to me. If I just made content about what I want to make content on, this channel would look incredibly different. If you go all the way back to the first 6 months I was on this channel, that's more or less what I was doing. A version of making whatever I wanted to make. Not responding to what the community was saying that they were interested in. At the moment I realized the community is not interested in something, I try to move away from it. This channel belongs to you way more than it does to me. I can't just cover whatever I want to cover. I care about high school track and field, specifically the top athletes at that level. It's why I run a recruiting ranking list and services that go along with it. But I also care about college track and field. I care not just about college track and field like the top athletes. I care about teams, the top teams. I want to see college track and field be more competitive than it's ever been. And I care about all the different events in that framework because when you focus on the team, all the events actually matter. My concern is that when you shift away from that, because, when it comes to professional ranks, it's a lot harder to cover everything now than it is in college. Everything's happening in one place for the most part when it comes to a college team. But the videos that I've made, the stuff I've put out on college track and field teams don't particularly do well. It just is what it is. None of those are in my top 25 or even 50 things that I've ever put out in the history of this channel. It's, again, just stating the facts. I would cover it more, and I'd love to spend more time talking about these things if other people wanted to talk about it with me. But yeah, for the professional level, I do focus more on sprinting than anything else. So when I make a video, when I put anything out that is distance focused, which sometimes I do want to talk about, because remember, I still care about it and know quite a bit about it and was immersed in that world for some time. There are moments where, to be honest, a lot of the people who watch this channel consistently aren't interested. And they just flat out don't watch it. Some of those can just sit at 200, 300 people who actually may have watched it in the first several hours, which is very, very, very low for where I'm at. The only time I have success, you want to be real? I told you we can be real. If you talk about athletes like Caitlin Tui, Parker Valby, something like that, then yes, people are probably going to watch. And I don't mean all people. There's a community of people through the system who eventually will find their way to that content. But in general, no, you can't just spark up and talk about these races unless people want to hear you talk about what happened in those races. So the idea of leading with world records, everyone has to deal with this on this platform about how we're going to put stuff out. But if you believe that the way I'm framing things is too negative, I will say one thing. I almost always put a question mark on the image and in the title itself. If there's a question mark and an exclamation point, then I'm asking a question. I'm maybe shouting for emphasis, but I'm not necessarily saying it is this way or it isn't this way. And I really do believe that all the evidence suggests that it's not about what I actually said in the video. It's about how people understood it before they got there. What I don't really understand, and again, comment section, you can help me with this, is if you really don't like it, like if you really, really don't like it and don't like me, I can respect that. I can totally respect it. I just don't understand why you would just not watch it instead of calling me outside of my name and bashing me on the way in your words. I'm more than happy to read comments that disagree with me if they are respectful. But the moment I start getting called outside of my name, it's really hard to take it seriously. Not even really hard. I just don't take it seriously because I don't believe that's appropriate for anybody to engage that way. And I generally try to make sure that the community doesn't really see a lot of that because that type of negativity, there's no place for that here. I don't think there's any place for that anywhere to speak to people or engage with people. Even if they're directing to other people in the comments, I don't think that that's appropriate in any way, shape, or form. So, hey, I told you I would be honest with you. I can admit when I'm wrong. If people believe that I should make certain changes here and there, I will consider it. But I also wanted to make sure that we are all having the exact same conversation. Because when I say we, Coach Rob Track and Field may have my name on it, but it ain't my channel. It belongs to you. And that right there is about as brutally honest as I can be about all of this. You actually made it all the way to the end of this video. I do have to admit that thank you doesn't do it justice anymore because you are a real one. Get your fast as a lifestyle track and field gear at scarecruiting.com/shop or use the link in the description below. It's a huge support to me and this channel so I can continue to make you more content like this. And remember, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe.